blimey, this is, yeah, okay. Why am I actually on this right now? Okay. I feel like I'm about to go boxing or something. So about 2 years ago, I actually came on this exact retreat. I was sitting right at the back, sort of hiding in a blanket, which is probably what I want to be doing right now. I was pretty shell-shocked from work. I'm a filmmaker, and I'd been spending sort of quite a lot of time working on film projects and building up my sort of freelance editing sort of career in corporate media. And if anyone's worked in sort of corporate media, you get eaten up alive pretty much, especially if you're a bit sensitive like me. And so yeah, I was sitting right at the back. I was sort of like hiding and holding on to a bottle of water and for dear life in case I had one of those dreaded coughs that you had make you like go out of the room. And Shraddha Siddhi was leading the retreat with Vidyadhaka, and slept in block A, and Maitreya Bandhu taught me to meditate in the beginners class. And as I suspect what's happened to a lot of you, everything went quite vivid. And I remember being a bit more aware of the water whilst I was having a shower, and the sort of the sound of the howling wind when I was like going for walks and things, and that kind of sense of enjoying a conversation for it being a conversation. So yeah, it was quite a phenomenal experience. The retreat 2 years ago. This retreat 2 years ago. So I was quite compelled by what I had experienced and what I'd heard from the talks and what I'd felt on my own and in my meditations. So I started to go back to the London Buddhist Centre. I'm from London, born in London, from London. And I started exploring lots of different classes and enrolled in 3 different courses. I did 3 in 2 years. My mum said I've worked a lot on myself recently. Don't know if that's a compliment. Anyway. So in this last 2-year period of time, I've been going to the centre almost pretty much every week. I live about an hour away, so sort of I know the Central Line quite well now. And I also went on a women's intensive retreat earlier on this year, and it was a even more sort of like phenomenal experience. Really recommend it if anyone's thinking of that sort of thing. And I have since also started to meditate at home, which was quite a bizarre experience, sort of getting the cushions and going, I'm doing this now on my own in my room. Maitreya Bandhu's not here, I'm on my own. Anyway. So yeah. And so since then, just to sum up, because I think all of us could probably talk for a whole day about just our experience of one day. So we'd be here for a long time. But needless to say, my life has changed somewhat quite beautifully. I now sort of sit way at the front because I kind of want to be near the shrine. And I'm not holding on to water for dear life for that fear of coughing. I feel more open and more honest and more grounded. And as Maitreya Bandhu mentioned yesterday evening, I've sort of come to appreciate a sense of things being more sacred, and that really does mean a lot to me. Okay. But 2 years ago wasn't actually the first time that I'd ever been on a retreat. So just to give you a little snapshot of where I'm from and my context. I had a great childhood. It's filled with a lot of art and love and trips around the UK and animals. I grew up in West London. I was very lucky to grow up in a very, very beautiful apartment with sort of like high ceilings and cast iron fireplaces, and it was like really, really beautiful setting for my imagination. And I grew up with my mum. It was just the two of us. It was me and my mum. And she is originally from Sweden. And she moved to London in the 60s. And her sort of big thing was that she met these two architects in France, and they studied in Eton. They had an MG, and they had a flat in Shaftesbury Avenue, so she was going to go and stay with them. Anyway, so she fell in love with London, and yeah, so I grew up in a very sort of like beautiful space, and she worked in the arts, did a lot of costumes for film and TV. I can name drop Fifth Element. I've got pictures of like the big police costumes on when I was like 12 years old, and the first two Batmans, and yeah, grew up with like rolls of fabric on one side and sort of, I don't know, rats' heads from the Nutcracker on the other, all in these big white walls. And yeah, there was also quite a bit of Buddhism around. She was interested in Eastern arts and read a lot about Buddhism. And yeah, and for about 10 years she spent some time restoring big Tibetan textiles. So yeah, Buddhism was always kind of quite there, actually. So as I mentioned, my mum was from Sweden. And every year we would go and stay with my grandmother. And in Sweden you have this thing where you go, so like you don't say grandma, you say, if it's your mother's mother, you say mormor, which means mother's mother. So farmor would be father's mother, and farfar, father's father, so on. And so mormor, my grandmother, Swedish grandmother, was effectively my other parent. So I grew up with the two of them. And I would spend all of my summers there. I'd spend all of my Christmases there. Just as Katrine mentioned, it's a very idyllic sort of space. I mean, there's more people in the whole of London than in the whole of Sweden. There's like a lot of space to sort of have ideals. And yeah, I could give you lots of details about it, but I get the feeling that you probably have got it from all the sort of adverts for milk or something, I don't know. Blueberries and, you know, forests and lakes. It was just like growing up in central London, it was very, very sort of brilliant combination of London pavement and Swedish forest. And yeah, in a nutshell, brilliant childhood. Being a teenager, I didn't really like it that much. I was quite awkward and didn't really know how to like flirt with boys very much. And I was sort of, you know, I went to an all-girls school and found it's quite bitchy. Lots of sort of cliques. You know, sort of, yeah, it was a bit kind of hard work. But I was really, really good at painting, and I was set to go to art school. And then one day, sort of early summer 2000, I was 17. Just after I was sitting an A-level exam at my school, I got a call from my neighbour. And my neighbour just said that I should come home. And I kind of had this feeling that it was probably my grandmother. It felt like that sort of thing's quite, you know, old people die. And so I asked him, he just said, look, just come home. So then I knew that that's what had happened. But I just wanted to say that when I got home, I wasn't really prepared for the information that I was going to get. So the neighbour paid for the taxi, and Mum was waiting up in our flat with a family friend, and then suddenly everyone disappeared, and it was just me and my mum in the kitchen. And after she had confirmed my fears that my grandmother had died, she basically said 3 words which I have been trying today to think of how to sort of bring them into this room. And I don't know if I really want to or can, so I'm going to try and articulate it in a way that lets you know without saying it, because I just don't want to be sensationalist. And basically she told me that my grandmother had been killed by the hands of somebody else. So it was unnatural and it was violent in her apartment. So I can remember that my face broke out into a cry, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget that feeling of how it broke. It's sort of like I suddenly knew a new part of myself. So yeah, there was an investigation. Sweden was quite shocked. It was in the papers. There was a trial and there was a sentencing, and which was 15 years. And that sentencing ended last year. I remember so much about that day. It's probably it's just a very, very, very vivid day. Like I said, earlier on, I could probably spend all day just sort of painting you the details. But the following day afterwards, pretty blurry, bleak and sad and traumatic. It was just a very, 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 very dark time. Life just sort of goes like this tenfold, with sort of everything is quite serious. So that's the sort of 2 years after that day was pretty much before I went to university. I was just kind of getting carried along by this current of trauma and my mum's devastation. Apart from a particular 2 weeks over Christmas. So one thing that I didn't really mention about my childhood when I was summarising it earlier, that my mum, I said that she was interested in Eastern arts and Buddhism. She had found out about a Buddhist retreat in an advert in Time Out by the London Buddhist Centre. So when I was a child, she would sometimes go off on retreats and I would get shipped off to my grandmother, and I now kind of see it as her break from being a single parent. And me and my grandmother, well, she couldn't really speak English, I couldn't really speak Swedish, so we had our time, I guess. And so after our tragedy in summer of 2000, which is 16 years ago, obviously, what do we do for Christmas? Because normally it would be the three of us and one of them wasn't there anymore, and it was very, very sad. I actually suggested to my mum, well, what about one of those retreats that you go on? And so we did, and we went on this winter retreat, and it was this winter retreat 16 years ago. Maitri Bandhu was there. Oh, we ran out of water. Jayaka was there. Jayaka remembers me being quite calm, which I took as a really big compliment, actually. And there were other people like Jana Varcha. I don't know if he's obviously a big, great teacher at the centre, and somebody called Shraddha Gita. And I had a memory of after one of the pujas, Shraddha Gita was sort of going up to make an offering, and it was just a very, very beautiful moment with her silhouette against the candlelight. Yeah, so it was sort of, I sat at the back still, I was at the back and watched the pujas, and I did the yoga class and did the group, and it snowed. It was beautiful snow. It snowed about this much, and me and my mum made snow lanterns for everybody, and everyone came out and gasped, and I think someone made a snow Buddha. So I guess what I'm trying to sort of build is that there were lots of truly wonderful moments, and I also guess the reason why I shared with you my this very, very strong experience in my life which I don't really talk about that often. There's a few friends of mine that haven't actually heard about it. It's not really something you can bring up in the pub, you know. Was that basically the reason why I'm sharing this story in this way with you was that as I was going into shock, not much was very distinguishable during those 2 years. It was a bit like what Vidyadhara was saying, that sort of grey. Everything was just grey. Like, I genuinely can remember little things, but I can't really place them and I can't really relate them to each other. Apart from, well, I guess this sort of 2-week island of like life and light. And I feel like that's actually quite a brilliant reflection, actually, because it sort of just sort of puts into context a little bit why I treasure this retreat and why I treasure the London Buddhist Centre and why I treasure the people that have that put on these events, this space for us, really. And also, so that reflection has been helped on by the space, I guess, that meditation has brought into my life the last 2 years. I hope that makes sense. So just to finish on one more memory that came to me while I was typing this up about 2 hours ago. From that very first retreat was that I went for a few walks and I too found a horse, and it also came up to me. And so I guess I experienced something sacred back then. Okay.